The general's glove hit her face with a wet leather thud. It wasn't a slap, it was a dismissal of her humanity. "You think because you can read a map you can lead my battalion?" General Vance sneered, his breath hitching in the sub-zero air of the Ardennes. He stood over Major Anya Thorne, who was currently on one knee in the blood-stained snow, her hands zip-tied behind her back. Around them, the 101st Airborne was in a state of fractured panic. The German White Ghost Division had just shattered their flank, and Vance was looking for a scapegoat. He looked at Anya's dark skin, then at the Major's gold oak leaves pinned to her winter parka, and he spat directly onto her rank. "I don't care what your papers say," Vance hissed, leaning in so close she could see the broken veins in his eyes. "No black woman leads my men. You aren't an officer, you're a mistake in a uniform. If we survive the night, I'm personally watching them strip those leaves off your shoulders before they hang you for insubordination." Anya didn't flinch. She didn't beg. She did something far more terrifying. She looked past the general, her eyes tracking a lone figure stumbling through the whiteout, a wounded American private who was walking with a strange rhythmic stiffness. Anya's voice was a low, vibrating hum that cut through the howling wind. "General," she whispered, "if you want to hang me, you'll have to do it in the next 10 seconds, because that soldier behind you isn't carrying a rifle. He's carrying 10 pounds of T4 explosive, and he's not stopping." Vance laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "You're still trying to play the hero? You're a maid who got lucky with a commission, Thorne. Sit in the snow and wait for the MP." He never finished the sentence. Anya's boot shot out, hooking the general's ankle and slamming him face first into the freezing slush. Before the guards could raise their rifles, she lunged forward, the zip ties snapping with a violent crack, revealing she had been holding a shard of glass from the downed jeep the entire time. She wasn't running away. She was running toward the explosion. The wind in the Ardennes didn't just blow, it screamed. But Anya Thorne had been screaming internally for years. As a black woman in the 1944 Army, every promotion was a battle, every salute was a miracle, and every day was a reminder that her greatest enemy wasn't always wearing a swastika. Sometimes the enemy wore the 3 stars of a lieutenant general. 10 minutes earlier, Anya had tried to warn Vance that the survivors walking toward their camp were too clean, too silent. Vance had responded by stripping her of command and ordering her arrest. Now, as she sprinted through the knee-deep drifts, the world slowed down. She saw the private. His eyes were glazed, fixed on the command tent. Under his heavy overcoat, a wire glinted. He wasn't a soldier. He was a human bomb sent by the SS. "Thorne, stop or I'll fire!" screamed a sergeant behind her. Anya didn't stop. She reached the bomber just as he reached for the toggle in his pocket. With a roar of primal strength, she didn't just tackle him. She used his own momentum to heave him into a frozen ravine 50 yards away from the general's feet. The world turned white. The shockwave didn't just vibrate, it shattered the ice. Anya was tossed backward like a rag doll, her body slamming into the metal frame of the general's command car. For a moment, there was only the sound of ringing ears and the smell of burnt ozone. When the snow settled, General Vance crawled out from under the slush, his face pale as a ghost. He looked at the ravine, now a blackened crater, and then at Anya, who was coughing up blood, her uniform shredded. She looked at him, wiped the crimson from her lip, and stood up, taller than any man in that forest.
"The bomber is dead, General," she said, her voice like cold iron. "Now, are you going to keep insulting my race, or are you going to let me win this war for you?" The silence that followed the explosion was heavier than the blizzard. The guards who had been ready to shoot Anya just seconds ago now stood with their rifles lowered, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. They had watched a woman they were told was inferior throw herself onto a blast to save a man who had just spat on her. General Vance stood up, brushing the frost from his pristine coat, his hands trembling. He was a man built on the pillars of old army tradition, a tradition that didn't include women, and certainly didn't include black women holding power. You disobeyed a direct order," Vance stammered, trying to regain his mask of authority. Anya stepped closer, the heat from the burning crater behind her casting a flickering orange glow on her face. "I saved your life, Vance. Don't confuse my mercy with obedience." "You're still under arrest," Vance roared, his voice cracking. He looked at his sergeant. "Sergeant, why are you standing there? Restrain her!" But Sergeant Miller didn't move. He looked at the crater, then at the major. He remembered how she had led them through the forest when the maps were wrong. He remembered how she was the only one who didn't sleep until every man was fed. "With all due respect, General," Sergeant Miller said, his voice steady, "the major just saved us all. I'm not touching her." "This is mutiny!" Vance screamed. "No, sir," Anya corrected, her voice dangerously calm. "This is a change in leadership, because while you were busy trying to humiliate me, you didn't notice that the German Jaeger units have already surrounded this ridge. If you want to stay in charge, you can stay here and die for your pride. But if these men want to live, they're coming with me."
She turned her back on the general, a move of supreme disrespect, and walked toward the tactical map still pinned to the hood of a smoking jeep. "Gather round," she commanded, and for the first time in the history of the 101st, they didn't wait for the general's permission. They moved. The night was a throat-cutter. The Germans knew the Americans were reeling from the suicide attack, and they were closing the noose. Anya was in her element. Before she was a major, she was a ghost, a scout sniper who had survived the worst of the Italian campaign. She climbed a frozen pine, her Springfield rifle slung over her shoulder, her breath coming in shallow, controlled bursts. From her vantage point, she saw the movement, white ghillie suits sliding through the trees like wraiths. The Germans were sending in their elite, the Jaeger snipers. "They're baiting us into the valley," Anya whispered into the radio. "Miller, tell the men to hold the ridge. I'm going to take out their eyes." Down below, General Vance was huddled in a foxhole, his bravado gone. He was watching the woman he had called a maid pick off German scouts with surgical precision. Every crack of her rifle was a message. Crack! A German spotter fell from a ledge. Crack! A machine gun team was silenced before they could set up. Suddenly, a bullet hissed past Anya's ear, clipping the bark of the tree. A German sniper had found her. This was the extreme tactical shock. It was a duel of shadows. Anya didn't fire back immediately. She waited. She let the German fire again, the muzzle flash giving away his position for a fraction of a second. She adjusted her windage. The wind was gusting at 30 knots, and she whispered a prayer her mother had taught her. "Is this a joke?" she whispered to the wind, echoing the general's earlier insult. She pulled the trigger.
A kilometer away, the German white ghost, a man credited with 300 kills, fell backward, a single hole through his Zeiss scope. The German line broke. Without their snipers, the infantry was blind. Anya slid down the tree, her hands frozen, but her heart on fire. She walked back into the camp, where the men were cheering. She walked straight up to General Vance. "The ridge is clear. We move out in 5 minutes." Vance looked up at her, his ego finally shattered. "Thorne, I didn't know."
"That's your problem, Vance," she replied. "You never looked at the soldier. You only looked at the skin." Dawn broke over the Ardennes, a pale, weak sun reflecting off a forest of corpses. A relief column of Sherman tanks finally broke through the German lines, accompanied by a black sedan carrying the Supreme Command's flag. General Sterling, the man in charge of the entire theater, stepped out of the car. General Vance hurried forward, trying to fix his uniform, hoping to salvage his career. "General Sterling, thank God! We've had a major security breach. An insubordinate officer. I was just about to—" Sterling ignored Vance. He walked straight past him, his eyes fixed on Major Anya Thorne. To the shock of every man present, General Sterling, the most powerful man in the region, snapped a sharp, crisp salute to the black woman standing in the snow. "Major Thorne," Sterling said, his voice booming, "I received your encoded report. You were right about the infiltration. If it weren't for you, this entire sector would have fallen." Vance gasped. "General, you're saluting her? She's under arrest." "Arrest, Vance. You're the one under arrest. I've had eyes on this outpost for weeks. I know about the disrespect. I know about the slaps. And I know that Major Anya Thorne isn't just a major." Sterling reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of silver stars. "Effective immediately, by order of the President, Anya Thorne is being promoted to Brigadier General for her actions in the Shadow Division. She now outranks you, Vance, and she's the one who will be signing your court-martial papers." The silence was absolute. Anya took the stars and pinned them to her shredded parka. She looked at Vance, who was now being handcuffed by the very MPs he had ordered to arrest her. "No black woman leads your men, Vance?" Anya asked, her voice echoing through the frozen trees. "You were right. I don't lead your men. I lead the army that's going to win this war. Take him away." As the snow settled over the Ardennes, the silence was no longer heavy with threat, but with the weight of a profound realization. General Vance, stripped of his sidearm and his pride, was led away, not by the enemy, but by the very system he thought
Energy
he owned.
Thorne did not celebrate. She did not gloat. Instead, she picked up her Springfield rifle and looked at the men who remained. They weren't looking at her skin anymore. They were looking at their survival. In the crucible of combat, the frostbite didn't care about lineage, and the bullets didn't check for rank. The only thing that mattered was the truth of one's character. The moral of the story. The story of Anya Thorne serves as a stark reminder of a timeless truth. Prejudice is a blindfold that only the wearer suffers from. When we judge others based on the surface, their race, their gender, or their background, we don't just diminish them, we limit ourselves. General Vance's arrogance almost cost him his life and the lives of every soldier under his command. He was so busy looking at the shadow that he failed to see the light that was trying to save him. The 3 pillars of the moral. 1. Competence has no color. True leadership is forged in skill, empathy, and sacrifice. It cannot be granted by a title, and it cannot be taken away by an insult. 2. Character is revealed in the storm. It is easy to be brave in a boardroom or a heated tent, but true greatness is shown when you choose to save those who have sought to destroy you. 3. The danger of ego. An elite leader listens to the quietest voice in the room, for often that is the voice that sees the suicide bomber before anyone else. Final thought for the audience. In your own life, are you acting like the general, blinded by your own biases? Or are you like Anya, standing tall in the snow, doing what is right even when the world tells you that you don't belong? Remember, you don't need permission to be a hero. You only need the courage to act when others are too blind to see. If this story moved you, don't just like the video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this lesson today. And tell me in the comments, if you were Anya, would you have saved the man who spat on you? I'll be hearting the most thoughtful answers. Until next time, stay sharp and keep looking for the truth beneath the surface. See you on the next one.